Welcome to the Great Basin Seasonal Outlook for May through August. We still have quite a bit of prescribed burning going on currently across the Great Basin as of May 1st, and you can see those purple dots across the Great Basin, especially in Idaho and Utah, and also along the Sierra front. There are, however, a few small wildfires, as you can see in the yellow and red, and that is expected for this time of year that we start to get some new fires popping up that will likely still remain small and are easily controlled. But with the weather currently we are having and what we have been seeing so far this spring, prescribed burning is still ongoing across the basin. Over the last 7 to 14 days, we have had wetter conditions across many areas of the eastern two-thirds of Nevada, Utah, into central and eastern Idaho and Wyoming. And over the last 2 weeks, many of these areas have experienced above normal precipitation. So we are still continuing to see storms move across the region. Over the last 30 days, temperatures have averaged out to about normal to above average across the Great Basin, more normal across Nevada, and just above average across Idaho, Wyoming, and Utah. And precipitation has kind of been a mixed bag. Many areas have seen below normal precipitation for the month, but some areas that have peaked above normal are parts of western and northern Nevada and up into parts of Idaho and even western Utah. Since the beginning of the water year, October 1st, we've only seen above normal precipitation over southern Idaho, northern Nevada, and northern Utah. Also a couple spots around the periphery of Nevada and down into Arizona, but for the most part, generally below normal precipitation for the water year. However, if we look at since late January, we've seen generally well above normal precipitation across all of the Great Basin. So the precipitation was across the Great Basin, but once it started in the winter and through the spring, we have again seen those above normal conditions. Currently, our snowpack is still sitting either near or above average in many areas. The only area that's been below normal has been across southwest and central Idaho and into parts of western Wyoming. Also, southeast Utah has seen that melt off pretty quickly, so again, definitely below normal conditions there. But otherwise near to above normal across the basin, and we will continue to see this snow gradually melt over the next month. So now that we've looked at the last winter, what about the last 2 winters? Looking at the last 2 winters is definitely a good thing to do across the Great Basin because that definitely indicates where we are going to potential for fine fuel loading. So looking at our last 2 winters, you can obviously see we had a very wet winter last year, which was no surprise to anybody who was around the Great Basin, well above normal snowpack for all areas, and this snowpack took a very long time to melt off. Some areas saw historic amounts of snowfall for the winter season. This past winter, obviously we didn't have anywhere near as much snow as we did this 2 winters ago. However, we did still see near to above normal snowpack. So we are now coming off of 2 winters of either well above normal or near to above normal snowpack. Looking at the precipitation, very similar story. Many areas seeing well above normal or above normal precipitation for the water year, or at least for our wet part of this year. So again, coming off of 2 years of wet conditions, both with respect to snowfall and with respect to total precipitation. So does this even matter? These are the areas here on the left where winter and spring rains are more a driver of fine fuel growth. So where winter rains and spring rains are more important for fine fuel growth are the areas in the image on the left in orange. You can see much of the Great Basin really falls into that category. Some exceptions are southern and eastern Utah and parts of the Ely district. But for the most part, southern Idaho, northwest Utah, northern and western Nevada, and southern Nevada are really dependent on winter and spring rains for fine fuel growth. And you can see the image on the right for the last year. Obviously, we have seen well above normal precipitation in these areas, and if you remember from the slide just before, we've had 2 years in a row of precipitation that has been above normal or well above normal in these areas that will translate to growth. So our current soil moisture with the recent wet conditions we've had and also some of the snowmelt that we are experiencing, well above normal soil moisture in parts of the Lahontan Basin in central Nevada and also up into Elko, southwest Idaho, and northern portions of Utah. We're also seeing hints of above normal soil moisture in southern Nevada near the Red Rock area and in little pieces of eastern Idaho and Wyoming. So for the most part, soil moisture being higher certainly is a great environment for fine fuel growth. Other areas of the Great Basin, eastern Nevada into much of Utah, not showing as much for soil moisture, but we certainly have some carryover in some of those areas. Our current drought conditions, we really have almost no drought across many areas of the Great Basin. The only exceptions are on the periphery up in Idaho and also over eastern Utah, the Arizona Strip, and far southern Nevada, which are just finally showing some signs of abnormally dry or moderate drought conditions, but very minimal across the Great Basin. And you can see from the drought outlook, probably no change expected going forward, except for those areas along the periphery and the far southern tip of Nevada, far eastern Utah, and maybe central Idaho, where drought may develop further or intensify. Looking at how our drought has changed over the last year, last April we were still seeing many areas in abnormally dry or moderate or severe drought conditions. Obviously this year we've seen quite a big change with the recent moisture and the moisture we've seen over the last year. However, the bigger change is really over the last 2 years, where we saw, 2 years ago in 2022, we saw many areas still in the severe or exceptional or extreme drought categories. And again, here we are this year with no drought in most areas. So it really took 2 years of not only good monsoon wetting rains in the summertime, but also those winter and spring conditions for the 2 year period to really bring us out of drought. So how does that even matter? For Nevada, and this is for many areas of the lower elevations of the Great Basin, not just specifically for Nevada, but I use Nevada for time and for ease here to indicate really many lower elevation BLM lands. So looking at this schematic, this is a chart showing our drought conditions for the entire state from 2000, the year 2000 on the left, all the way through 2024. And again, you can see the cyclical pattern showing where we have more extreme drought that usually lasts for several years, and then our periods of no drought kind of in between, which are for shorter periods. The areas in black boxes show where our lower elevations tend to see above normal or well above normal acreage burn for the fire season. So you can see that most of those, actually all, happen in years that really we have no drought or are just entering drought. So looking at this year, we have no drought. We've come out of drought about close to a year ago almost. So we are in prime condition using this philosophy for fine fuel growth and an above normal fire season in our lower elevations. Now considering the higher ones, this is the same schematic for Nevada, but again using higher elevation fire statistics. The black boxes indicate where we not necessarily see high number of acreage. In higher elevations, that's really tough across the state and really in some areas. Usually our larger fires are grass fires in lower elevation that spread faster and get quite a bit larger than our higher elevation fires. But these areas in the black boxes show where we have our more problematic or significant fires or require teams or resources. And again, this is just for Nevada of drought and especially in more significant drought. Another tool very relative to drought is the Palmer Drought Severity Index. There has been some research done by Matt Reeves, who we are working closely with for his fine fuel development. It's been really extraordinary for the lower elevations for fine fuel analysis. Has found that the Palmer Drought Severity Index in the June of the previous year has an indication to what fire season might look like for the Great Basin. So looking at June of last year in 2023, you can see here on the left a lot of dark green across Nevada, Utah. Again, using that for this fire season would indicate some of those areas might be a concern. So looking at some past years that have been bigger years. So again, this is the June before. So 2012, using the 2011 map, 2006, 1999, and 1996. Again, all showing that dark green signature across much of Nevada and Utah into Arizona and even southern Idaho. So again, we're lining up for yet another drop in the bucket that we could have an above normal season and most likely will. So now that we've determined that we could have an above normal season, what areas of the Great Basin are most at risk? So first we'll look at some carryover. This is the, again from Matt Reeves, fine fuel loading carryover from 2023. So again, what's carrying over in 2024. This is just pounds per acre across the Great Basin, and it does not include eastern Utah, but we'll have some other maps that will show that as well. But you can see from this map, the areas in green, or in certainly the darker green or blues you see, have the higher fuel loading, and those are above 500 or 600 pounds per acre. So again, you can see southern Idaho, northern Nevada, parts of the Central Utah mountains and the foothills are right in the valleys to the west. Parts of Nevada, again, really a strong signature for southern Idaho and northern Nevada into northern Utah. So now looking at the percent change, what happened into 2023, and you can see the percent change. Again, this is not fuel loading numbers specifically, but the percent change. And we've had quite a bit of additional fine fuel in central western Nevada, northeast Nevada, Idaho, Utah, kind of scattered across the basin, which would be expected in our wetter conditions we've seen over the last 2 years. So how does the carryover from last year compare to other years, and especially other bigger years? So looking at 2005, again, this was a big year for parts of southern Nevada specifically. There were fires in other areas, and this map kind of shows a lot. But first off, the fire perimeters for '05 and '06 are in purple and blue respectively on the map. Looking at the comparison, any colors you see in orange or reds basically means that we have less production of fuel from 2023 than we did in 2005. So again, most areas, southern Nevada, if you're down in that area, obviously 2005 was a huge year. So we have quite a bit less fuel than we did in that year. But many areas, central, eastern Nevada, parts of Idaho and Utah are actually seeing a little bit more. But really it's more significant in 2006. So the comparison from 2023 to 2006 carrying over, again, we actually have quite a bit more fuel carrying over than we had in 2006. And 2006 was a big fire year across the Great Basin. Similarly, 2017, we had some big fire years in northern Nevada, western Nevada, other areas of the Great Basin. We are seeing pretty much lower amounts of fine fuel loading going into this season than we did in 2017. But some areas, southern Lahontan, central Nevada, some of those areas, Idaho, western Utah, are seeing a little bit more. And then 2020. Some areas saw a decent amount of acreage burned in 2020, but others did not. But in any case, obviously we had a lot of other things going on globally, but we are seeing quite a bit more fine fuel loading than we did in 2020. So that just gives a comparison if you are around in those years or have some observations to really see the differences. So looking at some of our current fuel conditions, our fuel moisture really is not a concern at this time. We've had storm systems continue to move through the Great Basin, giving us some opportunities for increased moisture, cooler temperatures, a little bit higher at our past conditions and our current conditions, but now we'll look at what's coming at us for this fire season. So for the last long period of time, we've been in El Nino, and we are transitioning out of that. And this really just shows all the lines are different models that forecast sea surface temperatures, which is how El Nino and La Nina is classified. So basically we've been in this warm feature of El Nino with the sea surface temperatures. All the models are showing a cooling trend, will likely return to neutral, and then possibly La Nina later in the year, maybe towards the end of the fire season or in the fall. So what this actually means for us, a lot of our impacts from El Nino or La Nina in the Great Basin are felt during the winter time. However, we still do have some impacts going forward into the spring. And what that means as we're transitioning, as we will likely see really a change in the weather pattern at times. We'll see periods of warm, dry weather, followed by periods of low pressure areas coming in, bringing us cooler, wetter conditions and gusty winds. So this is the precipitation outlook for the next week, going into the first week of May. So we are expecting those storm systems to return and bring us decent amounts of precipitation to the northern half of the Great Basin. Southern and eastern areas likely will remain on the drier side. Over the next 2 weeks through the first half of May, we'll likely continue with this pattern with cooler temperatures and wetter conditions over especially the northern half of the Great Basin. But going forward after that, we are expecting some changes. This pattern will likely continue through mid-May, and then it looks like later in May we might see warmer and drier conditions for a prolonged period of time. So as we are actively in green up right now, we will likely see some faster curing in some areas going into the latter half of May, but then we could see some storms return by June, kind of slowing things down just a bit. But really our warmer conditions head into July and August, and even with precipitation, this bottom row, we're really getting into the drier pattern towards July and August. So what this means for everything, putting it all together, first we need to look at the monsoon conditions. And the monsoon forecast is obviously very difficult, especially when we're talking about it in May. Lots of things can change by July and August, but I will say the models have been fairly consistent with holding on to this near normal or cooler signature for temperatures along the west coast, and also drier conditions overall during the monsoon season for the Great Basin. So again, that could change, but right now it's showing that we might be a better chance of being drier. And that's a big change from what we saw the last 2 years, especially depending on what area of the basin you're in. So now we'll put it all together, and our outlook for May is just showing normal conditions. Again, we will fuels that are already dead and dried or fuels that are drying, but that will likely be mixed with fuels that are in green up. So again, we could see some very localized increases in fire potential because it will be a fairly windy month. However, by June, we're looking at generally above normal conditions for possibly the Red Rock area, just with the fine fuel growth we have seen reports on. The rest of the Great Basin will probably still be curing and drying out, so it will definitely be a drying month throughout June. Looking at July and August is really when things start to perk up, especially across northern, northeast Nevada, northwest Utah, and southern Idaho, and into part of the Lahontan Basin. So we do have above normal, which we have expanded going into July and August. Those are the areas that the fine fuel growth certainly looks like it will be most problematic. So that those are the areas we're definitely targeting going into July and August, especially if the monsoon is either delayed or on the weaker side. That certainly would give us more drying conditions during July and August, or the potential for dry lightning. So that's something we're watching going forward. This area certainly could expand, but these are certainly the most areas that the fine fuel loading over the last 2 years will be the most concern. That concludes our webcast for this month. Check back next month for the latest updates.